Welcome to my shawl and tell video. I thought I would get outside a little bit today, even though it's drizzly and raining. I'm under the porch swing and it's not that cold. So it's Washington, Memorial Day in Washington. Sometimes we get sun, but oftentimes we'll have drizzly, rainy weather at this time of year as well still. So anyways, I've got my pile of hand knit shawls and I just wanted to show you guys some of the projects I've worked on because shawls are some of my favorite things to make. Number one, because you can get away without swatching. Gauge often isn't an issue unless you're doing a pattern that's very, very specific to the amount of yarn that you need. You can get away with stuff. So I also love a pattern that you can use up as much yarn as you have, especially if it's something that's either hand dyed or hand spun. I don't love having little bits of yarn left over from projects all over, especially if you can just get it worked into the pattern and get it used up. So I would say that this one is the first thing that I had knit in a long time, probably 10-12 years ago. I for some reason was inspired to go visit a little local yarn shop that we had at the time. It was called Yellow House Yarns. And this was my first encounter with Madeline Tosh. So this is one of their thicker single yarns. And their colors are just unreal in person, the way the yarn just jumps out at you. So I had to have this. And it was just a little guy because I think at that point I couldn't really afford a whole megaton of yarn. So I just got the one skein, and the pattern is called The Age of Brass and Steam. And it's one of those free ones on Ravelry, and I think a lot of people have knit this. It's just a little kerchief style, so I've worn it like this quite a bit. I don't usually knit cowls because I don't love pulling things on and off my head. It just kind of turns my hair into a frizzy ball. So I don't knit that kind of thing, but anything that wraps around. This one's short enough I could tie it, or I could wear it as like a bandana as well. Something cute like that. So anyways, that one really just kind of stemmed my love for knitting. My mom had taught me to crochet when I was young, and I had done a lot of that over the years, but I was never into knitting until this guy. This guy did it. I don't do a whole lot of crochet anymore nowadays. So anyways, that was a great kind of little jumping point to get me back into knitting. So this next one is a hand spun, and this was a knit along. And the pattern isn't available anymore, but it's called Topography. And it was a cool pattern. She gave you a formula that had you measuring your yarn, so you knew, kind of weighing it out to know when to start the edging section. And then during the body of it, you could throw in these little purl ridge rows. The recommendation was if you have one color that pops in the yarn, you could do the purl anytime that color shows up. So that was a really fun way to knit the project. I like this shape. It's kind of the squared off triangle. I think if I made a larger shawl in this shape, I think it would ride on the body really well. But this was a superwash merino that I picked up from Edgewood Gardens. I actually am close enough to those guys that I was able to go up to their house, which is just a fascinating place. I've been there a few times now. It's got little tiny spiral staircases and hidey holes and spinning wheels everywhere. It's just a really fun place to go. And Ilga was really sweet. She sat me down at a wheel, one of her Lendrums, very early in my spinning career, and kind of gave me some tips and really changed the way that I was spinning and learning to spin. So she made me, just in half an hour's time, a more productive spinner. She talked a lot about ergonomics. And yeah, I was just really thankful for that opportunity. So anyways, I got to pick this fiber out of some of her things that she had dyed up at that time when I was up there for the visit. So I haven't worn this a ton. I would say this is not my favorite color. I grabbed the fiber because it was one of the things that she had available at that time. But I should maybe think about wearing this one more. I had thought about maybe finding somebody who liked the colors a little bit more, and that's another option. Is finding someone else to love it. My all-time favorite pattern for handspun yarn is the Quaker Yarn Stretcher Boomerang. I don't love a long rectangular scarf. I never wear those, but something that's in a triangle or a long boomerang triangle is a great way to use up your yarn, because you start at this tiny end and you just do decreases on, I think on both sides you do increases on one edge and you do decreases on every other row. But the pattern is a couple of bucks, and It shows off your yarn really beautifully, and it doesn't get in the way of color changes, but it has enough interest in the kind of striping variation of the stockinette back and forth and stuff that it's not a completely boring, just all stockinette thing. So I have another one of these on the needles, and this is a hand spun that I did from a Malabrigo newbie, which is, I bought 2 skeins of that stuff, 2 or 3 skeins, and all 3 of them when I bought them were kind of like octopusy and weirdly shaped and kind of felted in places. So I haven't bought any of that stuff anytime since. I was kind of put off by that, but the colors were really pretty, and it's a merino, so it's a little bit loosely spun, and it might be a teeny tiny bit pilly, but I really like the way this project came out, and I'm trying to decide if it was a 2-ply or a 3-ply. I'm pretty sure it's just a 2-ply yarn. I actually knit this up over 2 days. I was in bed one time sick on some medication where I couldn't really walk around, and just knocked this out. It came together really quickly. So if you need a pattern for hand spun, this is the way to go. Use up all of the yarn, have a good time while you're at it. This is one of the non-hand spun shawls. It's really funny. I pulled all of these out and realized that I only have done a couple, 1 or 2 out of commercial yarn. Most of them have been hand spun, which is really exciting. That can be kind of a weird jump to make when you first start spinning. Is this yarn good enough to make a project? Do I have enough to make something? Those kind of questions. It's a great way to just kind of like bite the bullet and jump in and do it. So this is a Stephen West pattern called Rising Dawn, and this yarn is by Gauge Dye Works. And what they had done is someone had knit this out of 2 skeins of the yarn, and so it just came together so beautifully. She ended up dyeing up a batch specifically for this pattern so that it would do this gradient from the orange through the gray into the blue, and then you get back to the orange on the edges. So I ordered that kit specifically for that. It took me a couple years, but I got it finished about a year ago. Haven't blocked it yet. I did weave in the ends. Haven't blocked it yet. But it's a really pretty drapey, I think it's a pie construction, so you're only really doing increases on these eyelet rows. But I do love this. I love this color combination. The orange and blue. I love a warm and cool, kind of sweet and sour color combination. So that one was fun. I don't feel like it was a slog either. The knitting of it wasn't like never ending. There's a little tiny bit of patterning in the stitches, enough to make the yarn really, really pop. This was just a brilliant kit to put together, and I love this. Absolutely love this one. Another hand spun. This one you may have seen on Instagram sometime in the last year or so. I made a set of rollags on my blending board I started with a base of, I want to say it might have been like a Shetland roving, and I blended in just kind of different bits and bobs of stuff that was kicking around in my fiber bin. And so I don't remember how many sets of rollags, but it was quite a bit, maybe 5 or 6 ounces. And I would say it's maybe the teeniest bit overspun. A little bit dense for what I would like. If I could go back in time, I might adjust that. But in the end, the project is really pretty. It's a teensy bit small, so I'm gonna need to get out some wire and make a shawl pin or something like that to be able to wear it up my shoulders. And it's almost a little bit dense to wear like this, but I've half contemplated pulling it out, but I knit it like 3 times already. When I did this one the first time, I had to pull the lace back because the pattern is free and it's a bit of a recipe. She tells you how to get there, but you have to kind of know what you're doing to get the lace patterning to work out. And I forgot to do all these increases down here. So it was weirdly shaped and I had to do it again. But this one is called the Resonation Shawl, and it is free on Etsy. Not Etsy, why do I keep saying Etsy? It's free on Ravelry. If you do it, just make sure that you really look at those lace charts to make sure that you get them figured out. But I feel like this yarn is some of my most favorite handspun yarn, and if you go to my Instagram, you can see the whole project from start to finish. When I blended it up, it was really kind of a fun progression to go through. This is one of my absolute favorite things that ever has come out of handspun for me. It is called Dream Stripes, and it's free on Ravelry. So you've got the stripey business, and then you've got a lace section. It really needs to be blocked again because I've worn it so much. But it was 2 handspun yarns from Fibers. I feel like one might have been Edgewood Gardens, or they might have been October House. I can't remember. It's probably on my Instagram. I went as far as finding out the names of the patterns for you guys, but I didn't look up all the details. But anyways, I love how both of the yarns have a subtle gradient in their striping, and this pattern just shows that off really, really well. And I wear this one all the time like this with a little jacket or something. This one is probably my most worn handspun item ever. And here's another handspun shawl. This was a spin along, knit along maybe that we did for Spin 15, probably back in 2015, 2016, something like that. And this is called the Lonely Tree Shawl. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Lonely Tree Shawl by Sylvia McFadden. And I think it's like $5 for the pattern, but I chose a fiber specifically for this. It was from Elemental Fiber Works, who's another local indie dyer, and so it's a fiber that has just a tiny bit of color variation, kind of a kettle dye look to it. So it was enough to keep me interested in spinning it. It's kind of a lofty, super soft, lightweight 2-ply. And this was the lace knitting project that taught me to use stitch markers for like every single lace repeat. And that's how I knit lace from this day forward, just so that I can find my mistakes and fix them more easily. But this one also, the finish on this is just garter, so you can knit and knit and knit and use up all the yarn. I believe this was maybe a 6-ounce put up, so I was able to get a really decent sized shawl out of that project. And I was looking at my Instagram feed today to find some of these, and I was reading how I was really excited about finishing this one, and how it was the Spin 15 a day group that had kind of spurred me on to get this project finished. So the birds are out. The rain has let up a bit, so we've got some bird friends joining us now, which is awesome. This one is a handspun that I did from a Paradise Fibers subscription box, and it was the Egypt themed box that they did, and I've subscribed to that off and on. And one of the things I kind of tell myself is, for the most part, I want to try and do at least some of the recommended project that they have, or at least use all the fibers together in the box to try and make something that even I might not have made on my own. So this one came with, it was like a sage green and this bright blue kind of bamboo-y fibers, and then a white fiber, and I wanted to stick with this kind of like Egyptian papyrus theme. So it's really blown out right now, and I'm just using my phone. I don't know if the color's gonna come back very well or not, but if you can see this pattern, it's called Stormy Sky, and it's free on Ravelry, and it needs a blocking. I haven't blocked this one yet, but my favorite part about this pattern is these sections where it's just, you know, bars of handspun yarn. And I would recommend, if you're going to do something like this, to make your tassels ahead of time so that you know you have enough yarn. I would have liked to have more fullness, but I just hung on to a ball of the yarn at the end. But this was fun to blend on the blending board all together, and like I said, with that goal of trying to use all of the box in one project. That was something that I never would have done this without that fiber box kind of spurring me onward in this project. So yeah, I really love this, and I've worn it around a couple of days. It is just really cozy and drapey, and a really fun pattern. I did have a little bit of trouble with the pattern. There's some of these rows with the eyelets where I couldn't get the stitch counts to line up right, so I did a little bit of fudging, but you can't really tell in this pattern at least. And then one more to show you. This one I've worn quite a bit, maybe even in a few videos, but I even wore it to the doctor's office when I was getting my tetanus shot, when I was telling them I work with raw wool and metal and needed to stop scratching myself up. Maybe you can see it on the new drum carter I had. So this is all hand spun, and it's super huge and chunky yarn. I spun this brown stuff from the cloud. I just kind of washed and picked and fluffed out the fleece and spun it. And then this the blue yarn, it looks like 2 yarns, but it's really a set of bats. And then I had a bag full of kid mohair locks. So I did a coreless core spun with the locks, and then separately I spun up a single from the bats, a really chunky single, and then I plied the two together, and then when I ran out of the fluffy stuff, I just Navajo plied the rest of this. And so I'm really annoyed as to why this coloring is blown out on this video. Hey, there we go, that's better. Now you can see. So this one is really warm, and I'll put it on because the shape of the shawl came from the Aroha Knits thing that she does, an email that you can sign up for that teaches you about the different constructions of the shawl. So this is loosely based on the crescent construction, and so it's really kind of long and is very weighty, which I really enjoy. That's a thing with me. I like weighted blankets and heavy clothing and stuff like that. So it sits on my arms, and it's long enough that it stays on and doesn't drop off, and I wear it out of the house like I'd wear a cardigan, and I absolutely adore it. So these are just some of my favorite projects, and I really want to encourage you, if you're not really, you know, to that point where you're, you know, spinning for a specific project and you're just spinning yarn for the experience of it and learning and really just enjoying the colors and the time you get to do that, I would say find a project that isn't going to be picky about gauge, isn't going to be picky about yardage, something that you can stop at any point or keep going on, like that Quaker yarn stretcher, and just give it a go, because the objects you come up with in the end are so unique and so personal and so special. So I hope you guys are having a great weekend. I will talk to you later. Bye.